The interstellar music hall floated above the orbit of a pale blue world. Its transparent walls shimmered, allowing distant stars to glint through the curvature of the hall. Thousands gathered to witness the galaxy-wide cultural exhibition, a monumental event hosted once every 5 years. Delegates arrived from distant colonies. Humans came dressed in fine garments. Artificial companions hovered and glowed. Translators rested on wrists. Every corner buzzed with expectation. Within the hall, the main stage glowed at the center of the dome. A crystalline piano stood on a raised pedestal. Legends sat here. The greatest performers made history here. It had been formed from a monolithic block of resonant crystal, mined on a moon that vibrated when sunlight touched its surface. People whispered about its perfection. They whispered that only those worthy could cause its notes to bloom. At the front row sat an accomplished figure named Leora. She wore deep blue attire embroidered with silver threads. She had been trained since childhood. In every conservatory, her name carried weight. Those around her spoke in reverent tones. They declared her unrivaled. She sat tall. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. She had performed on countless worlds and cultivated admiration everywhere she traveled. Across the row sat a quiet woman named Mara. She arrived with no entourage. Her clothing looked plain. Her steps seemed uncertain when she entered. She was not an accomplished figure. She was not known anywhere. Most did not even register her presence. She signed her registration form at the entrance and found her seat far from the main aisle. A few glanced at her, then dismissed her. When the announcement came, Leora was scheduled as the final performer. The organizers believed that finales belonged to legends. Leora cherished that well-known rule. Many congratulated her before the concert even began. She nodded without humility. The performance roster scrolled across raised holographic panels. Delegates murmured when they spotted one unfamiliar entry near the center. Her status read Independent Citizen. Her training credentials read none. Leora glanced at that segment and smiled faintly. The lights dimmed. A host walked into the center and explained that the exhibition celebrated human achievement across species-wide dispersion. Music had become the most enduring cultural thread linking every colony. Then the host stepped aside. The first performers played elaborate orchestral variations. They produced sound that rippled across the chamber. A choir projected harmonic scales. A cluster of digital performers manipulated tonal waves. The audience listened politely. Some applauded. Some nodded with restrained delight. Then a soft bell chimed. It was time for the unfamiliar entry. Mara stood slowly. A few spectators tilted their heads. She walked toward the pedestal. Her movement lacked grandeur. Her shoes made faint tapping sounds. She reached the crystalline piano and paused. Liora leaned back and whispered toward a delegate beside her. That delegate suppressed laughter. More whispers followed. Mara simply placed her fingers across the instrument. The piano responded. A clear tone emerged. A warm vibration escaped its surface. It carried across the dome with remarkable clarity. The delegates quieted. Mara closed her eyes. She began with a sequence so delicate that it sounded like a distant star appearing for the first time. The notes flowed gently. Each tone landed at perfect intervals. Then she strengthened the tempo. The piano resonated. The hall brightened. The planetary horizon beneath the dome shimmered faintly. The audience held their breath. She continued. She created sound like moving tides. Some tones pulsed like the memory of childhood warmth. Others struck like sudden realization. The notes expanded like ripples turning into waves. They rose. They traveled. They gathered momentum. Her melody evolved into something no attendee could categorize. It was not a classical structure. It was not a simple ballad. It held fragments of ancient lullabies. It held suggestion of distant frontier storms. Her hands drifted lightly, yet produced grandeur. Delegates forgot to blink. The hall resonated like it had awakened Dot. Soon transparent walls around the hall vibrated in subtle luminescence. The crystal structure refracted light. Every angle glimmered with shifting blues and golds. Her music felt like memory distilled into sound. Dot. At a distant row sat two researchers from a colony that studied neurological acoustics. Their headsets captured frequency responses. The graphs displayed irregular spikes. Their monitors could not categorize the tone complexity. One researcher stared wide-eyed. The other whispered at the frequency patterns, aligned with emotional signatures beyond normal training fields. Mara continued. She shifted to a low register. The music deepened. It felt like standing inside an ancient canyon, listening to sunset wind. Then she accelerated upward. The progression lifted hope. Delegates felt thoughts emerging. Some remembered their homes. Some remembered ambitions abandoned. A few cried quietly. The piano glowed brighter. The crystalline surface pulsed. It was rumored in many worlds that resonance responded only to authenticity. Most believed that legends alone unleashed that glow. Yet here stood a common woman who commanded the instrument not through superiority, but sincerity. She played. Her posture remained simple. Her face remained calm. The audience leaned forward. A coordinated awe spread from front row to distant balcony. Even artificial companions lowered volume. After a final ascending passage, she ended with a quiet resolution. The last note shimmered with extraordinary clarity, then faded. Silence spread. Chairs creaked as people shifted back from the edge of their seats. Mara stood. She bowed once, then stepped away. Then the applause erupted. It was not polite applause. It was thunderous. It was seen rather than heard. Bodies stood. Delegates raised arms. The host pressed both palms together. The acoustics of the hall amplified the celebration. Mara bowed again and found her seat. People stared at her with disbelief. She seemed unaffected. Leora sat motionless. She folded her arms. The schedule still marked her as the finale. Yet it no longer felt like a privilege. Instead, the spotlight felt heavy. Her expression stiffened. The host announced a brief intermission. Delegates gathered around Mara. They asked where she studied. She answered that she practiced alone on a standard keyboard in a small shelter near an agricultural district. She spoke gently. She revealed that music had been her companion during difficult days. She said she played each night after work. She said she taught herself by observing rainfall rhythm or listening to the tone of passing skyfreight engines. The researchers asked to interview her later. Someone offered her a position on a traveling ensemble. Someone else offered resources and mentorship. She declined politely. She said she enjoyed solitude. When the intermission ended, the crowd returned to their seats. Many whispered that the finale seemed unnecessary after what they had witnessed. Yet the program moved forward. Lights dimmed again. Leora stepped toward the piano. Her stride looked confident yet tight. She sat. She placed her hands upon the instrument. Her opening sequence began flawlessly. She executed rapid flourishes. Her precision impressed. The crowd acknowledged her skill. But the sound lacked warmth. It carried perfection without emotion. It dazzled rather than touched. Delegates listened with measured admiration, but not awe. She shifted to her famed signature piece, a complex arrangement known across many colonies. Her tempo accelerated. Her hands darted. She declared control over every measure. Yet the hall no longer responded. The crystal remained dim. The resonance remained thin. She reached a triumphant chord, and held the sustaining pedal. But the conclusion evoked polite applause rather than fervor. She bowed. Her gaze flicked toward Mara with a faint tremor behind it. After the finale, the exhibition judges gathered. They compiled evaluations from cultural scholars, neuroscientists, audience response algorithms, and resonance readings from the piano. A long panel projected their findings. At the top of the ranking, the unfamiliar entry name appeared. Mara was declared laureate of the exhibition. The announcement shook the chamber. The council representative stepped forward and addressed her directly. He said that her performance reshaped public understanding of expression. He said her interpretation represented the next era of frontier culture. She bowed modestly. News transmissions ignited across networks. Video clips circulated in every colony. People watched her quiet entrance and extraordinary performance. They watched the crystalline glow. They watched the silence after her final note. The entire human diaspora discussed her. Specialists coined terms to describe her tonal layering. They argued about how she accomplished it. They tested instruments. They attempted to replicate her modulation. Their results fell short. Meanwhile, Mara returned to her small living space near the agricultural district. She resumed her usual schedule. She tended to local gardens. She maintained the shelter roof. At night, she played again on her plain keyboard. She practiced not for glory, but for clarity. Her neighbors sensed something different around the region. They felt calmer. They felt lighter. They said that the wind carried faint melodic traces. Some thought it imagination. Others believed the land remembered her performance. The Interstellar Music Hall Committee extended invitations for her to appear again. She declined. They attempted to persuade her with honors. She declined again. They respected her decision. Leora traveled through colonies afterward. At each venue, she played with flawless expertise. She retained admirers, yet something had changed. She remembered that moment when the crystalline piano glowed through honest sound. She practiced late at night to recapture the sensation. She researched emotional tone fields. She read about neurological resonance. She humbled herself and took advice from younger musicians. Eventually, her music softened. Instead of impressing, she tried to express. Audiences began to feel rather than witness. In time, historians wrote about a turning point in musical culture. They wrote about how humans rediscovered sincerity. They claimed that pure motivation outshined prestige. Mara became the symbol of that shift. Several years later, the committee erected a monument within the hall. It was not a statue. It was not an image. It was a single plaque that displayed a phrase praising unadorned expression. Visitors touched that plaque before performing. They reflected on intention. A distant colony transmitted an archival recording of Mara's original performance. The recording evoked similar reactions, even across vast distances. Audio analysts reported that emotional resonance rarely degraded with time. They claimed that truth persisted, and eventually a young traveler discovered her settlement through scattered reports. He visited her shelter. He asked to learn. She taught him patiently. She instructed him to listen first. She directed him to observe rainfall and rhythm of life. His training advanced not through competition, but contemplation. Throughout the human worlds, her legacy endured. They remembered a moment when a humble figure sat before a crystalline piano and played without expectation. They remembered how the world held its breath. They remembered how the hall glowed. Her story traveled not through fame, but through resonance. Human history often exalted conquerors, but this era celebrated quiet mastery. The era recognized that greatness rested not in stage prestige, but in honest presence. And across distant outposts, where humans continued building new futures, people told their children that authenticity could move stars. They said that if one played with truth, even crystal could glow.